Yo, 910, welcome to Fireside Chats. This is casual Wednesday edition. So we were suited up, but we decided Chris Hilken in the house, sweatshirts.
I couldn't be more relaxed right now.
T. Ross, is that a T. Ross sweatshirt?
Yeah, dog.
Dang.
I'm not going to get caught out here wearing some unfresh drip. Did I say that correct?
Yeah, that was good.
It's unfresh drip.
I asked Tanner. He's behind the camera wearing the same sweatshirt. But those are limited edition right there.
Yeah, they're limited.
The outline of Tanner's head. That's good.
Yeah.
But, hey, this is week 6. We're in overtime of Fireside Chats now. And so we figured, bring you in, Dr. Hilken, and have some fun, have a little bit of a conversation, potentially play some music.
Okay.
Maybe rap a little bit.
Whatever you want to do.
If you're into it. But yeah, diving into a little bit of a conversation. Chris, I feel like most people kind of know who you are. Like at least you used to be the 11-12 pastor. That's weird to say. I got my 11-12 sweatshirt on, actually.
Yo!
This is for you. I wore this
Vintage.
just for you. But used to be 11-12 pastor, dad of 18 children, all under the age of 3.
That's right.
6 tuplets, all of them. But speaking pastor, but who is when you look in the mirror and see Chris Hilken, you are Chris Hilken, and there's not the Chris Hilken-ness around it. Who is Chris Hilken behind the scenes? BTS.
Oh, interesting. I try not to look in the mirror too often because it's the worst.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I would say I am probably overly simplified. This quarantine junk is awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. I hope no one gets sick and I hope no one dies or anything, but I love being at home with my family. I would say I'm an Enneagram 8. Enneagram 8s, what's up?
8.
Whatever. Anyway, so
the challenger.
I'm the challenger.
Okay.
So I kind of live my life as the challenger a little bit. There's a phrase that my staff used to have in 11-12 when I was working with them, which is if something's not broke, try something different. So we just always want to try something new, and I think that's where a lot of the success that I've had comes from my lack of fear of just totally tanking and ruining something. So that's been fun, but I kind of do that in a lot of areas of my life where I just kind of want to test stuff and see what breaks and then move on with it.
As from my perspective at least, and I feel like from a lot of other people's perspective, I've seen a lot of that success and look up to you for a lot of that success. What are some of those tanks that you've had?
Oh my gosh. Oh geez. Yeah, I mean,
tell me where you failed.
There's a lot of different areas. I think predominantly when it comes to ministry, you think of all these different philosophies that you have starting out with. And so the first week I was here, the first week I was ever hired at North Coast Church, I thought if we wanted to get new people in the doors, we needed to create this killer guest booth experience.
Nice.
It's so embarrassing to talk about this. Do you have something in your life that just gives you the dumb chills when you think about it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Something you said to a girl at one point or whatever, or
Yep.
when you tried to be cool and then you fell, and it just makes it taps you on the shoulder where you're trying to fall asleep at night. Remember that one time?
For sure.
That's how this feels to me. So I created this guest booth experience with LED lights that were blinking and everything, and then you was like, oh, that didn't work. That didn't kind of draw people in. So then we were trying to do other really gimmicky things. So branded. If everyone's got pencils or binders that work for them, that are labeled from the ministry, that's going to help us grow. And it's just missing junk so bad.
Yeah.
That
the 11-12 pencil.
The 11-12
the thing that
pencil.
Everybody's not going to want.
Yeah, right in your head you go, everyone needs pencils in school, so they're going to borrow it and go, look.
Oh, totally.
And then that doesn't happen. There's just there's a long wake of really bad mistakes, which I don't think any of them were immoral mistakes, but just a miss of philosophy.
For sure.
I was on a boat one time and I caught a fish at the Delta and then I bit its head off in front of all the students because they said I wouldn't catch a fish. So I took it on top of the houseboats and I bit its head off. And that's before I realized
to prove them wrong. Right?
Yeah, it was
Look what I did.
Well, it was flopping around, so the people who were you're making it suffer. So I bit its head off.
Naturally,
to end its
you
suffering.
do. Yeah.
And in my head, growing up in the Midwest and the South and then in Bakersfield, that was a very normal thing, not to bite a fish's off, but you want to end its life, but I didn't have a knife or anything, so I just bit its head off. And And like the head of the camp came over and had a stern talking to with me and everything. And it's just moments where you just go, I wish I hadn't done that.
Right.
Or I wish I would have done it with me and my friends, like on a camping trip, but not in front of 120 students, most of which are freaked out about animal suffering. So like there's just dumb stuff that I've done.
People are calling PETA on you.
Yeah, man. Just what's your dumbest thing you've ever done in ministry?
Oh man.
/ life.
Dumbest thing I've ever done in ministry. I don't know. I think so. Probably the one that comes to mind right away is growing up. My dad was a youth pastor also, and he used to do this like epic event once a year called the Craze Maze, and they would collect cardboard boxes for legitimately like 18 months. Like the build up for this thing was nuts, and so but they
did it every year.
Yeah. No, they did it every other year.
That makes sense.
18 months. You know what I'm saying?
Otherwise
So
it'd be an issue.
good catch there. But so they would go down to like Lowe's and Home Depot and all these places that sold big appliances, and they would collect like refrigerator boxes, oven boxes, like all the big ones.
Yeah.
And then they had a gym at their church, which every church should have a gym. Just saying.
Absolutely.
But they had a gym, and they would build out this like gym size maze. And so like duct tape them all together. It was multi-leveled. And so you would come to the end of a maze, and like I didn't take a wrong turn or anything, or like seemingly you're touching everything, and realize you have to go back and up, and then keep going. So it was this epic thing.
Yeah.
And in my head, especially as a kid, like you're a pastor's son too. Like there's these things that your parents did in ministry that when you were a kid were like they were the greatest things ever.
Not me.
Maybe like Lutherans are pretty cool. Said no one ever. But sorry.
My dad never did anything where I went, that was so cool.
He like passed out communion one time in a way that you were like, wow.
Yeah.
That was awesome. But anyways, we were Baptists, not Lutherans, so they were.
That makes sense.
Yeah, a little bit different. But we were in this maze, whatever, as a kid. I always thought it was the coolest thing. And so when I first became a youth pastor, I was 21, fresh out of college.
Recreate the Craze Maze, bro.
And I thought to myself, I have to recreate the Craze Maze.
What a mistake. Here we go. Talk to me about it.
I didn't realize how much cardboard you have to collect. And so I collected what I thought was a lot of cardboard, and then I duct taped it all together, and it took up like a corner of a room. And it was the lamest thing ever. And cherry on top, we had a crazy kid in my youth ministry at the time that was like struggling through a lot of different things, but he ended up like freaking out at this conference that we did, and he ran and hid in the Craze Maze. And so I had to like tear this thing apart to get to him. It was a nightmare. The whole thing was just a nightmare.
So good.
But yeah, needless to
So
say,
good.
Phil Payne's Craze Maze was much better than my Craze Maze. But
fair.
when it comes to failure like that, being a challenger, how do you fail forward? I feel like a lot of failure, it decapacitates some people, if that's a word. Failure can be very discouraging, and it can be very much like, especially in ministry or things like that, you try something and you're like, wow, that sucked. What's your secret sauce there for failing and keeping moving forward and going, that doesn't define me or who I am as a leader? How do you do that?
I think a big part of it's having a team around you that really does love you, that even when you do royally screw up, you can always go back to them, and then you have this debrief session where you're able to talk about your screw-ups without it being who you are. I feel like early on I realized I had a call to ministry. When you feel like you're called to something, it's not something you do, and you don't have your feelers out in another area that you could go test the waters on. And that's why I tell people that want to go into ministry. I always tell them, do everything you ever wanted to do that isn't ministry first. Like, if you feel like you want to be like Burt Macklin, the FBI, go try to be an FBI agent.
Yeah.
Like, if you feel like you should be a CEO, you should be president of the United States, try everything possible, and everything will feel like the right shoe on the left foot. And then you're going to realize, I think I'm called to ministry. And then once you feel that call to ministry, what you're going to realize is it doesn't matter how big you fail. It doesn't matter what you do, because it's what you've been called to. So those little mistakes are just bumps in the road, right? Like in the middle of LeBron's season, if he has an off shooting night, he doesn't go, I'm not a basketball player. You just go, that's just a bad night that you had.
Dang.
So then you don't define yourself by your mistakes. Mistakes are points in time and not people. And so then you disassociate yourself with the identity of the mistake, but then you start to learn and you look at all your mistakes and you go, what didn't work? But if you don't have if you don't have the confidence to ask the question, then you'll just kind of hermitize yourself and be in your own little bubble, or you'll create perfection culture around you, and everyone will just always have to tell you that what you're doing is awesome. And when they can't criticize you without you freaking the crap out, then you're in a place where you're never going to grow. So I feel like that's been fun early on.
Yeah.
Was realizing I think that I was built and born to do this. So even if you criticize it, it's like, I'm a basketball player, man. Like I'm a pastor, so
that's cool.
I'm going to have bad days. But I feel like that's when you first start, you got to think, is this something that I'm trying for a little bit? In which case failure is going to define you and it can change the way that you do stuff. But once you go, this is who I am, it's like, I'm going to have bad nights.
Yeah.
And especially your rookie season is going to suck. My rookie season was crazy, but then you sit here and you
just out of curiosity before we break for our musical guest, what were some of those left-footed shoes that you put on the right foot early on, right? Like you said, FBI agent. Like I know for a fact there was a season where Chris Hilken wanted to be an FBI agent.
That's right.
Like you did theater and were really good at it. You originally thought you were going to be a worship pastor, not a teaching pastor. What were some of those other shoes that you put on that were like, no, this is for sure who I'm going to be?
Yeah, when I first graduated college, I got a job I was basically a closer on deals. So I've always had the gift of gab. So there'd be a house that was in foreclosure, and then there'd be a big investment firm or like a capital firm. They would send me in to go broker a deal with the person. And I would say, hey, my investment firm wants to buy your house out from underneath you. I know that you're upside down on your mortgage. We'd like to come buy it from you. And then I would get a share of whatever they turned into profit.
Yeah.
So I did it for like 2 months, like with my head down, just chasing that. And I made buku bucks. It was awesome, but it felt like it was off.
Yeah.
It was like I had all this money, but I didn't know what to do with it. Not like I don't know how to invest money. I'm just saying it just felt like, who
like
cares?
this isn't cutting it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think some people are built to do stuff like that and then to be philanthropic or to do that stuff. But for me, it really felt like I was a fish trying to climb a tree. And I had success in climbing the tree, but it still felt like I was missing something. Like I wasn't in my water.
Yeah.
So it just always felt super uncomfortable. So that would be another big one. I installed air conditioning units in the summer in Bakersfield attics.
Nice.
Which you could only work for 15 minutes at a time before you had to take a 15-minute break because it was like 130 to 140 degrees in the attics.
Yeah.
So, I chased that. I did investor stuff. And now those are all things I do like as a side hustle that are fun to do, but it's not my aim. It's not my
What's the
goal.
weirdest job you've ever had?
Oh man, I don't know. I would say probably the first summer I was here, I worked for Tri-City Christian School and I ran their summer day camp program.
Yeah.
But I was like in charge of all the miscreant kids that no one wanted to put up with. And so we'd go to like SeaWorld and stuff and I would be their personal chaperone. And it was
personal chaperone for Tri-City miscreants.
That's kind of my job. That was like kind of my job title.
Great job. We have a couple Tri-City miscreants in 910.
Well, now I've had them in the ministry. They've grown up.
Yeah.
And now they've gone through.
That's good.
And they were the worst. And now that they're older, I
Love
can.
you, Tri-City.
Yeah. I get to return the favor.
Yeah.
And so like they applied for camp. I didn't take them. They applied for missions trips and I rejected them.
I love that.
So in their face.
I'm
just kidding. I took them. They're great people.
in your face. I sold my body for science. I was a lab rat.
Hey.
Yeah, that's probably the weirdest job I've ever had.
That's technically prostitution.
No, well, not exactly. It was for science and medicine.
That's what prostitutes say. Not exactly.
It's different. But legitimately, when you watch like commercials and there's for medicine and stuff, and they go like, some side effects may include blah, 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 blah. Like the FDA, in order to approve a drug, like they test that junk on healthy human beings. And so I applied for it. I had to be under 176 pounds. So I had lost 6 pounds to do this thing. At the time, I was in college and desperate for money. I didn't have a car or anything. And I went into a lab for 8 days and they tested like this certain medicine on me. I had to sign my life away for it. There was this 150-page document I had to like sign every page of, but I made $5,000 in 8 days.
Shut up.
So
are they still hiring?
Worth it. We'll see if there's side effects. Like none yet. None yet. We're chilling so far, but anyways, hey, we're gonna take a break for our musical guest. We'll be back in a minute. Check it out.
Hi, Tanner. It's Dr. calling. I was just calling to talk to you about some of your lab results that I have back. We'll try to call you back before I leave if I don't hear from you in the next few minutes.
feeling some type of way that I can't be home. And now my life flipped, doctor told me to eat it, bro. Some mama believed it though, just bringing the baby back. Brushing my shoulder off, it's just some pain and a rash. They're shoving needles and tubes up in me. I'm black and blue with candy, them bastards, but they ain't kill me. Them sweats ain't feeling chilly, leukemia, feeling silly. Try to tell my girl it's cool to leave, and I meant that sincerely. But she stuck around and we in it. Little dude looking like something with a divine finish. Yeah, I'm a divine witness after hundreds of signs from God and my fly mistress. I don't need my spinach, I just need 5 minutes in my room with a mic. Hold the holy water, chill out or I'm losing a fight. Taught myself to bounce back, straight bruising these mics. And funny thing about these fights, I'm never losing them twice. Tick.
Got diagnosed today.
T. Ross the Giant was this year's Rapzilla freshman. I think that this is a hard time, and I think that music is probably going to have a standstill right now, and it has to be.
You could drag me through the mud. I got my demons on my shoulders. Demons on my shoulders. And you could take all.
We got the homie T. Ross the Giant.
Chill.
What's good? How you feeling?
I'm feeling really good, surprisingly.
Yeah.
I got the power. If this is my last breath.
I specifically had a bunch of mouth sores that made it really difficult to eat.
I remember you saying that was like the worst part.
That was the worst part.
Something so random could be the most painful.
Right.
I pray you love me anyway. Hey.
The cancer is gone. That's what I'm saying. T. Ross the Giant has beat cancer, and now he can focus on his music, his life, and everything else.
They Terry came home from the hospital from his treatments for cancer.
I pray you love me anyway. Hey.
Well, Mr. Chris Hilken, now that we've covered things like prostitution, Tri-City miscreants, and how you know if ministry is right for you when you've literally tried everything else, we want to dive in. We're in a 5-6 week, maybe more because of the coronavirus series, walking through Colossians chapter 3, 1 through 17, where we're really asking the question, how do you walk with Jesus? And so we went to camp. You know, you experienced Jesus at camp. There's worship. You've been to your fair share of camps now. And I think the question for especially pastors with hearts for discipleship coming out of camp is always, so what? Like, what does it actually mean now? And I think you've been at your fair share of camps where you're the guest speaker and you show up and, you know, you give a compelling gospel message and people make decisions for Jesus, but you don't really know their story. You don't know where they came from. You don't know where they're going. And so I think the big difference for you in the Jordan now, or when you were in 11-12, and for me in 9-10, so much of our passion is how do you walk that out? And that it wouldn't just be this camp experience. It wouldn't just be this camp high. And so the last couple of weeks have been us asking the question, what does it mean to daily spend time with Jesus? So for you, I mean, you've been on your journey, and I love that you have a rad story on growing up in the church and then kind of essentially almost, you know, declaring atheism and going, I'm not sure I believe in all this junk, and, you know, is it just because my parents told me it? And then coming to the conclusion on your own end, which is giving you such a passion for apologetics and things like that, and going, man, I want to wrestle through the hard questions of life. What does that look like for you now as a dad of 4, as a pastor, as a husband, as a coworker, a friend? What does it mean for you to daily walk with Jesus?
I think so much of mine is the community that I surround myself with. I feel like it's ironic that our walk with Christ is called a walk, because often it feels like the mud run or something, you know, where you're getting dodgeballs thrown at you and you go into this freezing cold water and someone shocks you with electricity, and that's kind of how it feels to walk with Jesus sometimes. And,
that's a real thing, by the way. Why do people do that?
I don't know. My brother loves it.
Like Spartan races.
My older brother thinks it's the best thing since sliced bread. He pays people money to go, and there's one area that's freezing cold. It's called like the Arctic Probe. I'm like, why would you sign up for anything that has an Arctic
no idea.
probe?
It's weird.
I feel like, anyway, that's neither here nor there. That's for a whole different fireside chat.
True.
But for me, it's been different in every season too. In this season, I would say the title of this season of Walking with Christ is the the great incision. You know, like when you get married, you become acutely aware of how selfish you are. And then you have kids and you realize you still never knew how selfish you were. And then you've got multiple kids and now you've got 4 kids. Not you, but I've got 4 kids. And it feels like there's no end to the depth of how broken I am and how selfish I am. You know, like, even every day when I get home from work, I have to look at myself coming up my driveway and like look at myself in the rearview mirror and go like, you're a pig. And you want to go home and you have every right, worldly speaking, to go in and sit on your butt and do what you want to do and just engage in sports when sports used to be a thing. And
Remember that?
remember
Good times.
but you can't. You need to be a dad. You need to go do this stuff. And so I feel like there's been a period of incision now of it feels like every day of my life there's more things that get removed, but then they get replaced with these different areas of godliness. And so I think for me, walking with Christ has been the refining process of these last few years. Have just like every time I go home, it's like someone's giving me a Bible study on selfishness and humility and servitude. And so it's like my life has begun to do that for me because I'm constantly putting myself in positions that are, you know, fairly uncomfortable, that are difficult, that you can either choose to be a bad dad or you can choose to be like Christ and to give up those different things that you desire, and you eat the cold food because you're feeding everyone else, and you know you get new clothes like this. And I got this like 2 days ago. I love it so much, and I've got my kids slobber on it, and but you just realize your life isn't your own anymore.
Yeah.
And so I feel like this season of my walk with Christ has been him really exposing in a deep way how broken I am. But I can't be so ignorant to think that having 4 kids is the end of the exposition of my selfishness.
For sure.
There's something else coming down the road that's going to further show how much I need Jesus. So I feel like that's my walk with Christ right now, has been how desperately I need him. And I feel like true knowledge is to know the extent of your own ignorance. And I thought I was a good person when I was 18. I was wrong. And then I turned 20, and then you turn 22, and it seems like every 2 or 3 years you have a sit down. I have a mental sit down with myself, going, "Who the frick are you?
Yeah.
Like, why? How do you treat people? Do you still have a temper? Do you still throw temper tantrums? What are you, 27? You know, like that happens to me all the time."
I'm currently 27, but that's okay.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah.
And I still throw the occasional temper
Yeah.
tantrum.
Well, I
Like
mean,
you've
yeah.
witnessed a few of those. Yeah.
So now that I'm 31, I've just started saying, I'm just done saying that I've arrived. So it seems like for me, I live now in a crucible of realizing that if I'm a pastor, if I'm a dad of 4, if I'm a husband now for 7 years, none of those things do a bit to undo the depth of my depravity, insecurity, selfishness. So now it's just kind of been it's a neat walk with Christ. I feel like as I get older, I internally get younger in my dependence on him.
Yeah.
Like I feel like more of an infant than ever on how much I need Jesus. So now it's really a daily reliance rather than when I was 18, it was like a monthly check-in. Then I turned 22 and I started this job, and it was like I go to my weekly devotional. Now I feel like an everyday 6-month-old toddler just going, "Hope you feed me or I die.
Yeah.
Hope you pick me up or I'm going to die.
Yeah.
You know, hope you take me out of this storm or else I'm going to die." And I've loved this season of like that infantile view of, I know a lot more than I've ever known. I've studied a lot more than I've ever studied. I have more opportunities than I've ever had before, but I feel younger in terms of how much I am not aware of how much I'm not like Jesus and how much I want to be. So that's probably that defines my walk right now. Community has been a massive part of that.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
I was reading an article this week that talked about like most of our growth in human beings. Like if you look at trends as far as talking to anybody about when they grew the most in their life, or, you know, even when they surrendered their life to Jesus, it's usually in a painful season. And this article was talking about how our growth as human beings either comes from pain of circumstance or pain that we choose, which is called discipline, right? And those moments of waking up early, or those moments of, you know, spiritual disciplines like fasting or giving up something, whether it be a meal or your phone for a season. And it's so interesting to hear even just a confirmation of that from you, of going, I find myself with more experience and more knowledge, and yet in somewhat of a painful season, not necessarily like physical pain, but having 4 kids under 5 requires a ton of sacrifice, and being a good husband and staying healthy and making sure your family is your priority and keeping that your calling, but fresh out of a season of working for the Jordan, this massive young adult ministry, and then, you know, working 11, 12 and still pouring your heart and soul into that ministry and caring for that team so well. And then teaching, you know, 15 weekends here at North Coast on our big church, and then traveling and doing all that, and just going, this season's been painful, and yet still having the discipline to look yourself in the rearview mirror and go, okay, second shift is starting. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm going to be the best dad. These kids don't deserve a dad that's tired after a long day of work. And seeing that firsthand and watching that happen is cool to see a 31-year-old going, this has been a painful season, and yet one of the most growth producing seasons I've ever had in my life. That's pretty awesome to see. In Colossians specifically, it says, therefore, as God's chosen people, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, patience, kind of piggybacking off that idea of that dailiness, right? You said when you were young, it's almost like a monthly check-in. Then it was this weekly, and now you really do feel like that. Jesus, if I don't walk with you today, I'm going to be selfish. If I don't walk with you today, I'm not going to be kind. Humility will not be present in my life, that my gentleness and my tone and how I speak to others won't be there. I love that analogy of clothing, and that's what we talked about this last weekend was, at the time I was wearing a Feel 910 shirt and a Hume hat, and when I physically clothe myself with those things, I'll interact with somebody and they're like, oh, you go to North Coast Church, like Feel 910. And they're like, oh, Hume Lake, I know that place. I went there. And my physical clothing can spark a conversation with somebody about what's going on. And I love that analogy that Paul uses of the way that we are clothed, not with physical clothes, but compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness. Those should make us stand out in a way, right? Therefore, as God's chosen people, he's very much so referencing the people of Israel, saying they stood out among the nations. Now you are God's chosen people. Clothe yourself with kindness, compassion, humility. They're these fruits of the Spirit, really, as he's looking back at Galatians 5. What does that look like for you in your life? And then maybe even crack open your pastoral heart a little bit as we talk to 910 and just say, what is the challenge for a Christian to daily clothe themselves with these things that make us stand out?
Yeah, I think busyness is the murderer of the fruit of the Spirit in some ways. Like, if you're not careful, the analogy, it plays itself out, right? Like, how often do we get dressed? Every day, unless you're like a weird skater Grom where you like wear the same outfit for 4 days, right? But it's like a daily choice that you make, but I think this perception of busyness for us in our culture, technology was supposed to be the end of busyness, right? It was like, now you've got everything in your hand. Now you don't have to worry about, going and doing this and going and doing all these things. But now that you have executed everything with one hand, like I can sit on the couch, which again, 50 years ago, I would have had to go to the bank and pay my mortgage and then go over to the pest control place and pay that and then do that. And it would have taken my whole day. And now I can pay my bills. I can do my taxes. I can, without getting my butt off my couch, and I can do it in 30 minutes. But now we've filled the gap of that extra time with more things that we perceive as busyness, but they're not really beneficial. They're just noise. It's not sound. It's just noise. It's not music. It's just noise. So the pastoral nature of that would be, I find it ironic sometimes that people feel like they don't have time to do the disciplines that God calls them to. And at the same time, the people that I know in my life that are the busiest have the healthiest disciplines when it comes to Jesus. Because it's not really about the time that you have, it's about the time that you make. Yeah. And it says like Satan's clever, like a roaring lion that's prowling. So, and then I love the idea of don't be deceived. Like scriptures use that phrase all the time. Don't be deceived by this. And too often we're deceived by saying we are too busy, which is a total lie. You're not too busy. We just don't manufacture. We don't make it. I've talked to you about this before. If I told you, if you practiced biblical disciplines of uniting yourself to Christ on a daily basis and being in the Word or meditating on His law, like Psalm 1 says, and at the end of this year I'm going to give you $10 million. You try to tell me that you wouldn't afford time in your day. You'd for sure do it. The problem is we don't view godliness as a priceless thing to achieve. We view it as a tertiary or secondary thing that the religious elite do in our life.
Yeah, that's so good.
But that's what Jesus talks about. He says the kingdom of God is like someone who finds a field that costs $50, but then he finds the most invaluable treasure in the middle of it that's worth $10 trillion, and he goes off. He doesn't have $50, so he sells everything he has so he can gain $50 because he knows as soon as I get $50, I'm going to have $10 trillion, whatever number I used.
Yeah.
But we don't view godliness or holiness or walking with Jesus as a priceless artifact. We don't view it as something immeasurable and beautiful. It's just something else to add to our daily schedule. And so I would challenge people, what beauty do you find in becoming like Christ? Because that will directly dictate how much time you spend seeking that beauty. If it was worth $1 million to chase God for a year, I guarantee you'd do it.
Right.
Which means that holiness for us isn't worth $1 million.
Right.
And that was something that I was challenged with by my mentor when I was in college, and that's rocked me ever since.
Yeah.
I just don't value it.
Dang. Yeah, we talked about this on last week's show, but how in seasons where we have more time, like right now, it's revealing how much of an idol busyness is and fatigue is, right? Because how many people answer, well, I'm good but busy, or I'm good but tired. And yet in a season like this, it's like, busy doing what?
Well, it's beautiful
right?
because it's almost like God gave us this gift, not that God like started the coronavirus, but it stripped everyone of their excuses, and now you almost have to self-reflect and go, now what?
Right.
Like, now what's my excuse? I don't have anything to do.
Yeah.
Now why aren't I opening scripture? And it's like, if not now, when? And the answer is never.
Right.
It's, do you treasure it or do you not?
Yeah.
I've got 4 kids. I just got finished doing 2 jobs. I teach on the weekend. I'm running side hustles. I'm a property manager for the different rental properties we have. And I'm a husband and obviously a landlord. I do all those things at the same time, and I make time in my schedule for it. An 18-year-old version of me, if I were to get in an argument with him, he would tell me that I was dumb and that I don't understand how busy he is.
Right.
That's just the irony of it.
Right.
It's not about that. It's all about priorities.
Yeah.
Matthew 6:33. If he is what you seek first, everything else will be added to you as well. But if you seek other things, of course you're not going to have time for him. And again, it's hard and it's harsh, but it's just reality. If no one tells you, you're lying, you're wrong, you're making excuses, that's not true, then you're going to keep having your same friends pander because they're doing the same thing.
Yeah.
So that's why I think sometimes you need that kick in the pants from someone external. For me, it was my mentor in college. I don't know who it is for anyone else, but
yeah, I think that's spot on. Like I would totally agree with you. I don't think necessarily God's sitting up in heaven starting viruses, and yet I think so many people probably ask the question, like, God, where are you in this? Like, how could this possibly happen? And I think a lot of this is almost a grace gift from God to force and press this pause button and go, man, the illusion of control that you had it's shattering, and it's now revealing our addictions. And it's showing us where we were addicted to busyness and where we were addicted to the, illusion of fatigue and tired, because the more tired I am and the more busy I am, the more powerful I am and the more, prestige I have. And you even see it in our marketing, right? Like the marketing 20 years ago was people sitting on a cruise ship or sitting on a yacht somewhere going like, look at me, I have nothing to do. And now it's the Rolex and it's all this stuff in a office space, and it's the hustle and the bustle, and going, that is peak now. And something like this comes and presses the pause button literally on the world, and it's showing us now how little we care for God's word and how little we care for genuine community and vulnerability and these things. And I think it's been convicting and challenging for me to go, I'm not busy like I was, I'm not hurried like I was, and where is it revealing the areas in my life where I want to lean into the pain of discipline, and I want to lean into the pain of circumstance because it produces growth. And it's your spot. I wonder how many of us as 9-10ers, if I said however this Corona period is going to be, however long it's going to be, right? 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks till the fall, whatever. In that period of time, if you read your Bible every day, if you spent time in prayer, if you committed to silence and solitude at least once a day, and you showed me and demonstrated where you did those things, I'll give you $10 million at the end of this coronavirus. How many 9th and 10th graders would go, not me, no thanks. Right? Like, you'd be stupid not to say yes to that. Every person would go, $10 million, I'm in, boom. And yet, as pastors, if we said, hey, during this coronavirus period, if you spent time in God's word, if you spent time in prayer, silence, and solitude, the same exact things, and at the end of this, you'll know the God of the universe more, how many of us would go, no thanks?
Well, the question would be, well, why is it so important for you to have $10 million? Most people would say, oh, I'd be set for life. And it's like, yeah, but these other things can set you for eternal life.
Yeah, what about set for eternity? Yeah,
like
Dang.
It can really set you up in a position where you're not going to be thwarted when you go off to college. You're not going to be hoodwinked by some scrub who's trying to get at you when you're in college and like subvert your whole plan to follow Jesus for the rest of your life. These things can solidify that.
Yeah.
But it's not we don't see it as an investment, but that's really what Scripture says. It's
Yeah.
like you invest for the hard times when your friend dies, when your parents get divorced. But if you don't have that grounding and you're too busy for it,
Right.
you shouldn't be shocked when the world comes in and digs its claws in you and pulls you away from Jesus because you allowed, I think you talked about this the other day, like you allow the world 166 hours of your 168-hour week and expect that too to balance out the rest. It's just not going to happen.
Right. Right. That's good. We prepare for those rough moments in times like this where we can really hit the pause button and go, hey, this is where I get to lean into God's word. This is where I get to lean into.
And if you wait for rough moments like this to make sense of God, you're going to lower your theology to match your pain.
Yeah.
Because you're not going to think clearly. Like, no one's thinking clearly right now.
Right.
Everyone's gone psychotic. But if you're already firmly fixed in who Jesus is and who God is, which is right at the beginning of that section, then you're going to start and go, I can make sense of this.
Yeah.
I can understand this. I don't get it completely, but at least I know how it fits in the grand scheme of things.
Heck yeah, that's so awesome. Hey, well, thanks, Chris, for your time. Man, we love you so much in 910. Always appreciate your wise voice. Stoked 910 to dive into some life groups right now. Wherever you watch this, again, Google Hangouts, group FaceTimes. Make sure you're not just listening to this, but you're diving into conversation about it. We love you guys a lot. We'll see you this weekend.